talking to Oliver McGillick today. He's a event planner, producer in Prague. He works for the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra, broadcasting their stuff, and he's done a lot of festivals and concerts, big bands, Iggy Pop, and I don't know, he has a lot of cool names that he's worked with. Primal Scream, Kraftwerk, Sting, Liam Gallagher, just to name a few. We talked about actually, he's a son of an actress who escaped Communist Czech Republic twice, first to France and then to Australia, where he was then later born. And he told me a little bit about that, or his background and life and so on, how it was the difference between Australia and the Czech Republic. Australia, which he thinks is turning into a police state, which I tend to agree with. My experience of being there at least indicated that. And we talked politics because Oliver is involved in the Freedom Festival, which celebrates the anniversary or the milestone of the day when communism ended with the Velvet Revolution in the Czech Republic. So every year they host a celebration to remember that event. The importance of that people remember how bad socialism and communism was in reality, how politics are in the Czech Republic, and how young people are inactive or disconnected from current politics somehow, and what causes that. And then Oliver is gay, so we talked a lot about gay rights, how his coming out experience was, what he thinks about the gay movement in general, and what people like me, who are white, middle-aged, heterosexual men, the worst thing produced on earth in the current century, can do, or how we should be, and what is fair and what is unfair. He talked a lot about hyper-correctness, which is an interesting topic, of course, with political correctness. So we were a little bit all over the place. It was a really pleasant talk. Oliver's a great guy, and I hope you will enjoy. The sponsors, that's the Old Bar Prague, that's in Cypher Tower 21 in Žižkov, also available on home delivery on Volt and Bolt. It's perfect for breakfast, lunch or snack. Coffees are great, amazing juices, great homemade food, like with no nasty ingredients. And you can eat something tasty without feeling guilty, which is always a bonus. Then there is Alfred Jobs, alfred.cz, Alfred Jobs in the app stores, available in Russian, English, Slovak and Czech. And thousands of jobs all over Czech Republic and Slovakia, available in one interface where you basically can apply with one click. And you don't need to browse through millions of jobs that are not relevant to you. So you see just what you actually came for. Check that out, guys, and please follow the show wherever you're listening, so you don't miss an episode. Follow my pages, my Facebook page and my Instagram page. That the Bunker, How the Hell Did We End Up Here on Facebook, and the Bunker Prague on Instagram. And I would be very happy also if you had the time to give me a 5-star review in the Apple podcast service, because that really, really helps getting the show exposure. And hello to all the new listeners, and enjoy. Thank you. Welcome to my bunker, Oliver McGillick. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. So, you're half Czech, half Australian, and you have an Irish name.
Yeah, most of the Australians are Irish because it was a criminal colony. So I do come from an Irish heritage, partially because my father's Australian and my mother's Czech.
And can Czech people say McGillick?
It's challenging sometimes, but yeah, they can.
Yeah. You're here because we have a mutual friend, actually, who has been very good at finding me people to come on my podcast. And I wanted to talk to you about a few things today, a little bit about yourself and your background. We wanted to talk politics, the Velvet Festival, which is celebrating the fall of communism. It's coming up now soon. And we wanted to talk about gay rights, gay movements, and how that is. But I don't know. I mean, where to start actually?
Where to start?
You're born in Australia, right?
Yes, I was born in Sydney. To my mother as an actress, and my father was a theater critic and an art critic at the time. Then he moved on to writing and editing magazines and stuff like that around architecture. I lived in Australia until I was about 6. And we're traveling back and forth as a baby as well. But eventually, around the age of 6 or 7, me and my mother moved back to Prague. And my father stayed in Australia. They were separated already by then. So I started a new life in the beautiful city of Prague.
And how? But so your mom had left the Czech Republic during communism, right? She escaped, or
yes, she emigrated. She was an actress, and she was an actress at a well-known theater company in Brno called Husa na Provázku. And they were playing a mime show. They had a mime theater show. And one of the tours they did was to Paris, because it was a mime show. They could travel with this show. And when she was in Paris, before she left to Paris, she knew she's not coming back. She, of course, as an actress and as a bohemian soul, the communist times were very challenging, and she needed to get out. So she stayed in Paris. She found a flat by the cemetery in Paris. She lived next to a cemetery, and she ended up meeting her first husband and giving birth to my sister, who's 10 years older than me, in Paris. Eventually, they would move back to Prague. Her husband then and her child got evicted from the Republic, and she had to stay here. But she eventually, with a great amount of luck, managed to get approval to leave the country again.
So wait, she leaves during communism, comes back during communism.
Yes.
And leaves again.
And leaves again, that's right. Yeah, it was tricky for her because, of course, when she was in Paris, she suspected that probably the communist regime and the communist secret police were looking at her because there was some suspicious activity all the time around her. But then also she had her parents here, she had stuff here, she had a flat here, so she had to come back. But obviously, as soon as she got here, the husband and the child got evicted, and they met up again in, I think, Vienna it was. But she was lucky to get because they needed approval to leave the country.
It was not like, you couldn't just walk out.
Yeah, I don't remember the details now, but she was very lucky to get some sort of paper to let her leave. And of course, that's when she knew that for a long, long time she won't be coming back again. And her husband at the time, who was Slovakian, he had a lot of friends in Australia. And Australia seemed like a nice place, as far as possible from the devil horns of the communist regime. And so they went there and ended up living there for 15 years, meeting my father and giving birth to me in 1990.
Okay, and you're there, you say, until you're 6. And how was that? Did you learn to speak Czech in the home then, or?
I spoke mostly English over there, but I was a quick learner. I mean, my mom did talk Czech to me sometimes, but the main portion of learning Czech came when I was here. When I moved here, and when I was around 6 years old. As a child, you learn quickly, and growing up bilingual in a bilingual household, of course, it predispositions you with, I guess, a certain taste for languages.
Yeah. Well, you come here at 6, 7 back to Prague, and but you're going back and forth, right? You went to school both here and then you went to school in Australia later,
yes, I did my 4th grade and my 7th grade of elementary school in Australia. It was I think it was this kind of need of my parents to keep me in contact with the homeland and the language, which in retrospective I'm very grateful for. However, it was slightly traumatizing to keep changing classrooms. When I was a kid, I wasn't very good with new groups, which fortunately that changed with age. But back then it was difficult. So I was kind of happy to end up here. After my 7th grade, I would continue to do my high school and my university here in Prague, and partially in Brno as well, where I did part of my university.
But it must have been tricky, as you say, to go back and forth and, making new friends. I mean, what about culturally? I mean, not just fitting into a group, but at that time, so this is what, 98,
late 90s,
yeah. Then we are kind of fresh out of communism here, this must have been very, very different societies, I guess.
Yeah, it was. When I look back at it, of course, it was always challenging going there and then coming back. I think as a kid, of course, I idealized Australia because I was only there mostly. I used to go back for vacations a lot, like summer vacations. I'd go to Australia for 2 months and come back to continue school here. So, in Australia, I had the good times, and here I had to go to school.
Yeah.
And also, as you said, there was differences in society, differences in mentality, and But Australia changed as well as Czech Republic changed. You could see there was huge differences, which became less of differences, of course, because Czech Republic's is one of the fastest growing economics in the Eastern Bloc of Europe, in the post-communist bloc. So they're doing very well. And on the opposite, Australia is one of the most prosperous countries in the world. So there was a big divide, which became a bit, I think in my optics, I could see the differences getting smaller. But of course, it's still two very different mentalities, and that will never change. And they each have their specifics, of course.
You have family there, right? I mean, you still have family in Australia.
Yes, my father lives there with his wife, and I have another step family in Perth, which is Western Australia. So there's quite a large family there. Actually, probably the family there is probably larger than the family here. Actually.
And when I'm curious because often those countries like Australia, the US, the UK, these are often believed to be kind of the freedom, let's say on the forefront of freedom, let's say. And then this is what we're being told, this is kind of the global narrative. I mean, America fights socialism and communism and dictators and whatever, and does all the dirty job to make the world better. And then the surprising thing for me was, now I've lived in Iceland, Copenhagen, and then here in Prague, is that I don't think that I experienced real freedom until I actually moved here. And then I visited Australia, and I was there. Of course, I was only there for a month, but I saw it. I mean, as a guest, you often see the things that are interesting. And what I found there was an extremely high amount of kind of public instruction somehow. There was road signs with everything. They tell you the speed every 1 kilometer, the speed limit. You couldn't smoke less than 3 meters close to a public building, and not on the sidewalk, and you couldn't do this. It was really, really, for me, it was a surprise. Is this something like now that you have kind of been in both of those countries? Is this something that you noticed?
Yeah, I think. The narrative you spoke about these countries being the definition of freedom and all that stuff. I think it's tending more and more to be false sometimes, or at least partially false, because. And this dates back all the way to communism and what communism has left us with, and all the Eastern countries has been left with. Because countries that didn't have communism, didn't have totalitarian regimes, they tend to approach the subject of freedom and personal freedom especially very differently. So countries like the USA and Australia, I feel like, are becoming increasingly less free, I could say, than, for example, Czech Republic or Slovakia or whatever. It's a different story in Poland, maybe, because they're very conservative. But, if I can compare Czech Republic, which is a very liberal country, with Australia, I can see that the liberal society we have is actually a result of the communist regime aftermath, because we've known for so long what it looks like to be truly oppressed and unfree, that we are now very protective of our own freedoms and very protective of the liberty we have in Czech Republic. While places like the USA don't have that history, and it's becoming critical right now, I think, because people, they don't have the history of oppression, so it makes them probably not value their freedom as much, which invites much more restrictions, invites much more control from government, invites all this kind of stuff. And Australia, I talk with a lot of people who have this feeling that Australia is increasingly becoming more of a police state. A lot of regulations, a lot of rules. I think currently they approved some sort of law that they can now take your phone and install apps on it, and they can look through it. So And it creeps up slowly, one by one, these things, and that probably wouldn't be possible here, for example, because every single step towards oppressing you or taking away some certain freedoms is met with quite some backlash, because we remember what happened back then. And, remembering your history is also part of your future.
I was also thinking about this in the context of trust towards politicians, and I mean, of course, this is all interconnected, but I feel like here in the Czech Republic there is a very deeply rooted distrust or mistrust towards politicians, that they are, they steal and they're only thinking about their own interest and so on. Whereas I think in a lot of other countries, like in Iceland and in Denmark and maybe to some extent in Australia and the UK and so on, that we've always had this feeling that those people they would never do anything bad, and maybe they are not on purpose doing anything bad, but as you said, they maybe take tiny little steps somewhere and we end up somewhere where we actually don't want to be. And so I think, as you're saying, the backlash here is much higher than you would see there,
It is, yeah, it's true.
I think I will actually change this a little bit. We'll talk about the gay rights and that stuff a little bit later. I want to continue a little bit on politics here, because it's very connected to this. I mean, so tell me a little bit what you do, because I wanted to talk about it in the beginning, I forgot it. So you're like a event guy, music, all these kind of things, right?
I guess I could call myself a event producer. I produce events, music festivals. I work with artists, with bands on producing their shows in Prague, and not only Prague. And I also produce some smaller film shoots or commercial shoots, video shoots as well. So I'm a lot in the area of producing and making things happen, production managing, production coordinating. And most of it happens in the area of music, because that's where I've always strived. I was a musician. I always was a musician myself. I started learning the piano in 3rd grade. So I've played the piano for more than 20 years. I sing a little bit. I made a record once, which, if someone's very curious, you're going to have to Google it, because I'm not letting you know where it is. But you can find it. And then so I did a lot of music myself. I played with another band as well, and so I was very interested in that area always.
Is that something that came from your mom? The artist?
Possibly, yes. Well, she was an actress. She was never a musician, but as anything, it comes by coincidence. When we moved to a new flat in Prague, we were met with a piano, a grand piano that stayed there from the previous owners, and apparently I was immediately attracted by the piano. And as a small kid, I used to just go and play around and play some nonsense tunes. And my mother would see that I seemed quite fascinated by the instrument, and she would arrange for me to go to piano lessons, which was probably one of the best things that could have met me in my life. So it is, I probably take from my mother artistically, but also it's her.
She put some fuel on the fire. She could see something there, you know?
Yes. So that was, so that brought me to music. And fast forward a couple of years to my adulthood, I got one of my first full-time jobs I got was at the Hard Rock Cafe in Prague, where I ended up working for 6 years. My job was to do tours around the building and talk about these guitars and about the history of rock and roll.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was great, and it was a wonderful place to work for. And we did a music festival in London and all sorts of stuff. And but after a certain time, I decided to go freelancing. After 6 years in Hard Rock, I thought, that's enough of a full-time job. I'm going to be free now. And I started producing events. Well, I already was before, but so I used my newly acquired free time to work in more events and more festivals and go much more into that. And I was lucky enough to have enough work that I'm still freelancing till this day.
Okay. One thing about all the guitars and that stuff, is it all real in Hard Rock?
Yes,
all real. This stuff is real.
Well, yeah, it is. It's all real. There's a whole department in Hard Rock that their work is just acquiring this stuff and caring about it. They go to auctions and they buy these guitars, and most of them were really played by the artist, and if not played, they were at least signed by them, by their own hands. So it's fascinating, the stuff.
That's
sometimes.
Really cool. That's really cool. And what kind of, I mean, like it's music events mainly, but you're doing something for the Philharmonic and
Yes, yeah. For the last, actually, this was an opportunity that came to me during the pandemic because, of course, all live business, live music events were stopped. However, the Czech Philharmonic was already at the time. The Czech Philharmonic, sorry, I just still couldn't find the word now. The Czech Philharmonic was already producing this concept of the studio, a studio they built inside. They have a new audio studio and a new live editing studio, and they decided to make broadcasts from the empty hall for people to watch at home during the Philharmonic. So I was invited to take over after someone who was leaving as a broadcast producer and a stage manager for the broadcasts. And we produced a couple of broadcasts during the pandemic, so that kept me sane. And they decided to continue the concept even after the pandemic. So right now we're preparing the season opening broadcast, which we will have people back in the Philharmonic audience, but we'll also be shooting it and transmitting it live.
And it goes to, it's broadcast to Germany, and I mean it's not just for a local audience, right?
Yes, one of the broadcasts from the season opening is for Czech television, and the other one goes to Takt 1, which is a German and European platform, video on demand, where they do a lot of classical music content.
But you're not only done classical music; you've also been in rock. I saw a list of musicians that you worked for or worked around here. I mean,
yes. Mostly,
what are some of the biggest ones? Just to
mostly it was actually rock and roll and popular music. And I worked for a couple of music festivals. I worked for Metronome Festival in Prague. I worked for Rock for People. I worked for Mladí Ladi Jazz. And a couple of other music festivals in and out.
Metronome was Metallica, right? They have been there. Or
No. Metallica was there was something else. There was Aerodrome.
Yeah,
Aerodrome.
that's Aerodrome.
Yeah, sounds a bit similar. Yeah. And I also do Žižkovská noc, which is an urban festival. So thanks to these opportunities, I was able to work with names like Sting, Iggy Pop, the Chemical Brothers, Massive Attack, Tom Odell, Corey Henry, a lot of names. And
any starstruck moment? Any moment where you were peeing next to Iggy Pop and like, hey, how are you?
Well, I think you kind of, with a job, you learn not to be starstruck, because you do find out, they're normal people, just like any of us. And because most of my work happens backstage, because we work a lot of, we produce the non-technical part of the event. So, we're backstage, riders, transports, hotels, making the artist feel like home. It's the hospitality part, the guest service part of it. And so you realize, these people, they travel the world, and the only thing they just want to feel like home. They want to have a bit of, just relaxing, and they don't want any of that noise that they usually have around them. They want to come into they go to the next festival. They have no idea where they are. They don't know what day it is. They have no idea what's happening. And, they're happy to have their favorite drink in the dressing room, And so you learn not to kind of not show that they are the stars.
Yeah, allow them to be human for a moment.
So, I mean, of course, you're always a bit nervous when you're about to meet someone new, especially a big name.
Who made you the most nervous?
Oh,
what was the moment for you in this?
That's a difficult question. I think I was quite nervous with Iggy Pop, because it was one of the first years of Metronome Festival, and it was new for me as well, and he was a big name as well. I was quite I guess I was close to being starstruck when I met Tom Odell, because he's a piano player, and I like his music very much. And he actually left. I remember saying goodbye to him, and he said, "Thank you, Oliver. You're a great guy," and that made me very happy. But I think I tend not to be too starstruck, because it's the world. The world is different behind the stage, and as I said, these people, they need to feel like they're in the living room somewhere and not being bothered much. So we tend to those needs. Yeah,
I remember I had a moment when I know Bruce Dickinson, the singer from Iron Maiden, and we have mutual friends, let's say, and then they had a concert in Copenhagen, and he called me on my phone and said, "Hi, Almar, we're playing in Copenhagen today. You want to come by with some friends?" And I had a friend of mine from Iceland in Copenhagen. He was a fan of Iron Maiden. Of course, we'll go. And then we came there, and he said, "Just come backstage." And we went to the back entrance of the dorm, and just said, "No, you're not going in here." So we called Bruce Dickinson, who came and picked us in the dorm. I just thought, fuck, you know. And that was, for me, what you were saying about creating this atmosphere. You know, we came in there thinking like, you know, there would just be cocaine and heroin and strippers and, you know, all the works, you know. And this is not, I mean, this is maybe 15 years ago or something like that. So they were all sober, they were drinking tea, they were doing breathing exercises, and it was such a turn off, you know, because we came into this room, you know, like, and there was a herbal tea, and there were some grapes and fruits, and I was like, what the fuck, you know. And then I said to the band, guys, I reserved a table in a strip club, and they said, no, we're not going anywhere, you know. And of course we got wasted, me and my friend, and then after the concert I was still trying to get the band to come with us somewhere, you know, and they didn't want to go. And then I realized, you know, they just wanted to sleep because they had a gig the day after, you know. It's just, you know.
Well, I think there's a certain, you're right, there's always this fascination about going backstage, going to the dressing rooms. And of course, that's the fascination that partially attracted me to the job. It would attract anyone, I think. But of course, you discover that it's quite different, as you said, you know, it's grapes and breathing exercises is not very heavy metal, is it?
No.
But actually, you know, that's the world backstage. You think it's going to be that, but they're all just staring in their phones and just trying to have a bit of a nap, you know? And it's sometimes just the smallest things you think, you know, because it's very mentally demanding to tour, right? I haven't done tours myself, but from what I talk with tour managers, it's a very difficult job because, you know, you're constantly on the move, you're constantly unaware of where you actually are. And
we have someone here.
We have a visitor.
Yeah, we had a visitor here. Our cleaning lady came in to return a vacuum cleaner. She's really interesting. She's Russian, speaks no English, and I don't speak Russian, and I don't really speak Czech. But when she talks to me, she just raises her voice, thinking that I will understand a little bit better if she screams at me. But a great woman. So what you're saying is that, you know, when people are on tour, it's a very challenging environment for them.
Yes, it is, and so sometimes, you know, there's this fascination of riders. You know, when bands have riders, and everyone wants to know, what's the requirements? Do they have like crazy expensive champagne, or no? Sometimes they just want a silly candy bar. But that candy bar is the one thing you look forward to, and this is what my boss, who I work for in these festivals, told me. This is from his mouth. He said, sometimes that one little piece of chocolate is what you're looking forward to in that dressing room and keeps you sane for another day, you know? And that's why they have these requirements, you know, because they need to keep themselves somehow going in a certain state of mind. And, you know, because you're going to go out there, you're going to stand in front of 50,000 people and you're going to give everything, and you give everything every night, you know.
And you're surrounded by the same people the whole time on the tour, you know, you're sleeping in, you know, if some people sleep on a bus, you know, it's not a luxury all the time. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is. So, you know, I mean, there are some bands that still drink a lot and do a lot of drugs, but, you know, from my experience, it's been less and less. You know, the bands don't really, there's not that many bands going to this party life anymore because, as I said, you know, they're trying to be professional and they're trying to keep themselves going through that tour. So it really, it's not like in the movies that much.
No, I found out with Iron Maiden. But one of the things that you produce also is the so-called Velvet Festival.
The Freedom Festival.
Which celebrates the Velvet Revolution, right?
That's right, yes.
Okay, it's Google Translate is fucking with me because they called it the Velvet Festival. So it's called the Freedom Festival.
Yes, and it celebrates the anniversary of the Velvet Revolution.
Okay, and because, you know, a lot of my listeners are not from here and they don't know what is the Velvet Revolution. So tell me a little bit.
Well, the Velvet Revolution was basically the uprising against communism. So this was in 1989. And towards the end of 1989, in the fall, there was an uprising. There was a civil uprising when people had enough of communism. And this is connected with one other thing, which is the International Student Day, which is 17th of November. So there's a history there's a history of another student protest day in the history. So on the 17th of November, it was the March of the Students, which were reminding themselves of the International Student Day, and also protesting against the regime, and they were met with an aggressive lineup of policemen stopping them on the National Boulevard and beating up some of them, which created an even bigger uprising and evolved into an enormous protest on the 20th of November on Wenceslav Square, which would lead to the fall of the communist regime. And
there were like 200,000 people there or something,
yes,
on the 20th, right?
Yes. There, and there was also a protest on the Letna Hill, which is even more. They say there was like 1 million people there. So all these protests in all these days around November in 1989 eventually led to the fall of communism and all the communist politicians giving over power.
But it was. I mean, there was people were not killed. I mean, like.
Yes, that's why it's called the Velvet Revolution, because velvet should signify
softness or
yes,
smooth.
Yeah. No blood, no aggression, no death. It was a soft transfer of power. It was a transfer of power that came upon thanks to a certain mental pressure from the society and from the people. Czech people tend to be very complacent for a long, long time, but when they come together to change something, it really happens, and they can move mountains, And I think Velvet Revolution was a good example of how strong the Czech society can be, even though sometimes for someone from the outside, they look like they're very closed in, and they don't look like a very extroverted type of mentality. But it comes. When you have enough, you have enough, and that was Velvet Revolution. After 40 years of totalitarian regime and unfreedom and closed inside this little landlocked country, you become depressed and you need a change. So that was the Velvet Revolution. That was the big getting rid of the communists in 1989, and it's been 30 years since.
But they often say about the Czechs, they bend, they don't break. You can bend them, can't break them, and I mean, like if you look at the history here, there has been a lot of oppression on this nation by the Germans and by the Austro-Hungarians and then by the Roman Empire. I mean, there's always been someone trying to somehow break this nation, but never really managed.
Yeah, it's a constantly occupied country, isn't it? The Germans, the Soviets, and as you said, the Austro-Hungarian. So I mean, there's a long history of that, of course, and I guess that has bent the mentality, and some of it is not bendable backwards anymore. It's stuck to us in a way, the history of oppression. So we learn to adapt and overcome these situations, I guess. And that's what makes the Czech mentality unique in a way. And if you compare the Czech mentality to other Eastern European blocs, it is different.
It's very different. I mean, I've been lucky enough to work in Romania, all the Baltics, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, and it's very different here. But I also feel that the nation has a much stronger identity of, I don't know, values or togetherness. Somehow there is something that ties this better together here than what I feel elsewhere. I don't know exactly how or what. And I also felt that people here are much more loyal to their country than in some of the other countries, because people in some of these other countries are doing everything they can to leave. You know what I mean? Whereas I feel that a Czech person doesn't necessarily want to leave the Czech Republic. They're happy to go, stay away for some time, study or work or whatever, and travel and all that, but home is always going to be here somehow.
They come back, yeah. I think, they wanted to leave during communism, but that's gone. Everyone wanted to emigrate. But I think what you're saying is very true. The people tend to come back. There's a lot of successful business people who leave Czech Republic. They work in, I don't know, US, UK, wherever. But actually, when they're 50, they come back. Something, magnetizes and brings them back here. So I think the era of escaping is gone. That stopped with the Velvet Revolution and opening up the borders. And this is, of course, in the same time frame as the fall of the whole regime throughout Europe. The history of escaping is gone, and now it's time to be back. I don't see Czech people as nationalist or too strongly nationalist or chauvinistic or anything. We make fun of ourselves, and Czech people are well aware of their flaws and ups and downs. But I think it's nice to hear from someone from the outside that they see Czechs as caring for their country, because sometimes we don't think that about ourselves. Or if I can call myself Czech, I mean, I've been here for some time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of things that that I can feel that people are a little bit like, I don't know, they kind of gave up on, or they're ashamed of, I don't know whether it's it's usually around politics or cheating, some sort of some shady business, whether it's political or private business. But apart from those things, then I think, yeah, there are some fundamentals here that I think that people appreciate. But a little bit about, so every year this festival is celebrating, and I read an interview with you where you were saying that it was an important thing to remind the younger generation and to keep the memory of this alive somehow.
Yes, I think.
Is it to remind them how bad it was during communism, or is it to remind them how much we can do when we all pull in one direction, or both? Or
I think, well, I personally think it is essential to know your history and to remember what happened in order for it not to repeat, right? This is one of these famous quotes you can read everywhere.
Now we'll attribute it to you.
Okay, good. I'll take loyalties from that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important to know your history and the context of your history in order to be able to prevent it from repeating. And the concert itself we do on Wenceslav Square is called the Concert for Future, part of the Freedom Festival. So we look out to the future and we talk about what's ahead of us, and we have a look at this outlook. But to me, the future is always burdened by the past, because we carry our burden with us. We carry our history, we carry the good and the bad with us, and we have to talk about this. And I think the younger generation needs to remember that anywhere and at any time, because the generations carry on this burden, and they have to carry on history as well in order to prevent it from repeating. I think it's as simple as that, really. And we tend to forget. I mean, we do tend to forget. There's a lot of people who forgot about how bad communism actually was.
And you feel that? I mean, is that something that you see, or is it tangible somehow, or visible? I don't know, in the media or something.
I think it's just a general human way of being. That's what humans are like anywhere in the world. They forget. You tend to phase out the negative memories, and you only remember the positive. And we battle daily in Czech Republic with older generations, sometimes saying, "Oh, you know what? It wasn't that bad." And I say it was bad. This regime killed thousands of people. They ruined millions of lives, and they've made that much damage to this country that even 31 years later we haven't completely rehabilitated ourselves. So it was bad. And if we don't remind ourselves of all the crimes they did against humanity, if we don't remind us, we may end up electing them again. And it's that easy. It's just a paper and a ballot, and you can have this regime back. Right?
Yeah, I actually that's kind of the lasting effect of this, is that, and which was also for me coming here as a guest to this country. I felt very much like when I came here 12 years ago that I almost, and it's still like that. It's just the people are just a little bit older, but there were two nations in this country. There was the nations that were people my age that had most of their youth and education and the start of their career during communism, and then people younger that they were affected by it, but they had still managed somehow to change the mindset. So I think, yeah, it kind of lives in a certain thought process. I think sometimes people are not brave enough, and sometimes they are afraid to speak up. And I had people working for me that whispered always when they spoke to me, and I was like, "Why the fuck are you whispering?" And that was some sort of authority respect. You know what I mean? Like that, you're my boss. I shouldn't be loud around you. I shouldn't, And people always wanted to call me Mr. Hilmarsson, which for me is just, I'm fucking Almar. Just call me Almar.
Yeah, there's certain traditions or what to call this? Well, mental traditions we carry on.
But they are getting less and less, right?
They're getting less and less. Of course, the younger the generation, the more globalized the way as we live, of course. So, I mean, what Czech Republic has gone through as a country in the last 30 years is immense. It was an incredibly quick regeneration after communism, a huge economical growth. And this also brings globalization, so that the young generations now, they base their behavior not on the Czech tradition.
Yeah, they travel and they see things. Yeah,
exactly. Traveling that's good that you say this. I think traveling around the world is the most valuable kind of education you can ever have. Because going around the world and seeing how other cultures function, how other people behave to each other, how stuff is done elsewhere, that shows you context. And knowing context, the context of what you exist in, what you live in, I think that is incredibly important for you to be able to kind of adjust yourself to this world, this peculiar world we live in.
But so the purpose of the event is kind of to remember this and to show gratitude for the hard work the previous generations did. But if I look around now, I mean not necessarily here, I because I don't speak the language strangely after 12 years of being here, but I feel like there is a very much of a left-leaning tendency amongst younger people today, like, and in some places it's called socialism, or towards socialism, which is the foundation that communism is then built on. Is this something that you think is happening here, or?
I think it is, but I think it's difficult to define this as left-leaning. I think the labels of left and right are becoming outdated. And also, it's difficult to define the left and right in a country that has been burdened by communism for so long. So when we look at what we think left is here in Czech Republic, left is communism, socialism, and everything else is right. And we've only recently discovered in the previous years that we can have a kind of a centrist approach as well. And I think, the young generation does lean somewhere that the older generation would define as left, but I think this is not what the younger generation would call it. They are leaning towards liberalism. They're leaning towards a progressive and inclusive kind of world. Of course, this connects to some sort of issue of correctness and hyper-correctness around the world, which is a long discussion, of course. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with saying it's a left-leaning. I think, it's difficult, especially in this country, because, someone else would say that everything after communism was right-leaning, and now we're just centering ourselves again, we're
finding some balance. Because actually because that's also partially what happened here, is that we actually went kind of ultra-right in a way. And it's interesting, I read it somewhere, but why did corruption and all this, Wild West happen in those countries? Well, because they basically went overnight from a capitalistic system, communist system to a capitalist system without having the infrastructure, the institutions, the legislation, the court system, the political system. They didn't have anything. So it was very much grab what you can. And that created then a very kind of a capitalistic driven society. And I remember when I came here 12 years ago, then you had either rich people or poor people. And now we're getting to have a middle class. I mean, there was some middle class, but it was very small. But now that middle class is much bigger. And so I guess, as you're saying, what's happening is that things are balancing out, somewhere closer to the middle than and but the what I've always been surprised about here is how, and because of this distrust and mistrust to politicians, is the interest in politics. And let's say, and I know that you were working on now some video and some messages to encourage people to vote, young people to vote.
Yes, we're making a series of videos for the Freedom Festival, which are encouraging young people to go vote, because the vote attendance is traditionally quite low in Czech Republic. I don't know the percentage, but it's definitely not enough.
Yeah, I saw somewhere like 30-40%. It's some ridiculously low numbers.
It depends. Like the Senate vote is always terrible. That's like 20% or something. And the parliamentary votes, it's a bit better. That's definitely more than 50%. But still not enough. And sometimes the reason why we have trouble in Czech Republic changing that political structure is because not enough young people go to vote. And the people deciding the elections are older people who are just, voting the same party every 4 years just out of pure comfort, And we need a new generation to look critically at what's happening and reflect that somehow. Because I'm not saying that someone who's 90 years old cannot decide properly who to vote. Of course they can. It's just democracy. Everyone has to vote. But we're voting on the future of this country as well. So kids who are 18 need to realize that, you know, going to vote is pitching in towards what their future is going to look like. And that's important. So, and also when you look at the situation today, and now I'm speaking now personally, not for the Freedom Festival, because the Freedom Festival is doesn't incline to any part of the political spectrum. It's not apolitical, but it's non-partisan.
Yeah.
But me personally, I see a big issue now that, you know, the two democratic coalitions who are standing in opposition to the current government party, you know, they need to get 101 seats in the parliament in order to get rid of this old structure. And the polls are kind of just around 100, 101 seats maybe. And if we have just 50,000 more young people go to vote, we'll comfortably get over that barricade and we'll have 101, 102, 103 seats and we can start change. It's not a big country. It's 11 million people. I don't know how many eligible to vote from that, but it's not many people. So, you know, any shift can be a major shift at the end of the day.
But I think part of the I mean, I think there are multiple reasons why young people don't want to vote. I mean, they I mean, it's a silly process in a way. You need to kind of go somewhere, and you know, you need to prove your identity. I mean, I can understand why it is there, because, you know, otherwise people could manipulate it, and it could be easily, you could end up with some catastrophe. But it's just not what young people are used to do. They're used to do everything either through a computer or a phone, not even on a phone anymore, just writing something on a screen or filling in a form. And then we're telling them that they should go somewhere to some school to cast their vote on a piece of paper. I think it's very alien to a lot of them. And I also think that somehow maybe we are now having a lot of the youngest voters are unfortunately in a position where maybe their parents have taken very good care of them. So they are not necessarily thinking about what kind of future do I need, because they are very content in the now. I don't know if I'm saying that people are spoiled, basically.
That's one of the characteristics of this 21st century. Of course, people are spoiled. A lot of people have lived lives, their entire lives, in complete freedom, and have not been subject to any, you know, communism or totalitarian regime. You know, there's been, you know, in history, there's been people who lived through 2 world wars. I was born into a democratic country, Australia. I moved to a democratic country of Czech Republic in '97, and I never had to face any kind of political prosecution. I never had to stand up and fight. I didn't have to do my civic duty for the army anymore, because they canceled that in the 90s, you know. So we live a life that is so comfortable compared to before. But should we burden ourselves with this thought? Is it our fault that we're living a comfortable life? It's just the course of history. It changes, you know, and and this is an ongoing discussion in all parts of society. Can we look at today with the optic of yesterday? Can we look at yesterday of the optic of today? You know, it's like taking down Confederate statues in the USA. You know, and taking them down because now and today we don't agree with those principles. But when those statues were put up, they were put up in a different time, this all goes back to context. You know, we got to understand the context and when these statues were built. We got to understand the context in which generations lived and how that affects them. So yes, I would say maybe I am part of a spoiled generation, but is it necessarily a negative thing? I don't know. We have to learn to live with that and overcome that differently than generations before would, you know. Yeah,
I think, you know, I obviously I think throughout history of humanity, the next generation always has a better life than the previous one, and that's just the nature of it, you know. That's development, that's progress. My chief concern is that, like, because now we live in a country here, me and you, where the president is an alcoholic who has very controversial views. I mean, these are views, but they're controversial to a large part of the
You're saying that very nicely, you know.
Yeah, and we have a prime minister that is often in the news for the wrong reasons. He's a huge businessman. He has probably made more money on COVID than anybody else in this country.
Absolutely,
and he's accused of corruption and taking money that didn't belong to him or he didn't serve the European Union, stuff like that. So I mean, but someone voted them.
Yes.
And there are, I mean, obviously there are also, like with take the prime minister, because the president here is more like he's more like a decoration on the democracy than actually having a role. I mean, he has a veto power, but if you look at the prime minister, I mean, he has done, during his tenure, let's say, as a prime minister in his government, then things have certainly not got worse economically. There has been growth, and people are relatively happy here. And someone is voting him based on something, whether they get more money for having kids or whether they get a little bit higher salary or whether the pension goes up by 2% per year or whatever. But these are actually the issues that maybe, I don't know, a voter that is 45 years and older cares about. And then we would have a voter under 40 or something that is thinking about very different things, other topics and so on. So you can't really, if you don't show up and vote, you can't really criticize because you're basically giving the power away to somebody else.
That's right. Yeah, you can't criticize, but maybe the spoiled generation doesn't want to vote, but then something bad will happen and it'll be too late to fix it. So I mean, it's part of the duty to educate and remind people. We're back where we started, the circle, right? We have to remember what happened, and that reminds us of why it's important to vote and keep our democracy and, feed that democracy. And if we stop reminding ourselves and start being too comfortable, it can come any day. I mean, in 1948, when communism came to Czech Republic, it was like nothing. It was after the Second World War, and
it was actually voted. I mean, the Communist Party was voted in here. At that time,
of course, because somebody came and they said, "Oh, the Nazis were here. We're going to be against the Nazis." And of course, probably any of us would probably vote the Communist Party in 1948 because we all hated the Nazis and they killed fucking 20 million people here. So it happens that easily, right? But back then we didn't know who the communists are. Now we do. And this is part of, this is what's great about human beings. We learn, we adapt, we overcome.
But talking about communists, I mean, that because the velvet name on the revolution here is because it was a soft transfer of power. Has that been a problem actually? Because if you think about it, often the most drastic changes came when it was a bloody transfer of power. And I was often thinking about it because a lot of the people who were involved before, during communism, whether it was in the system somewhere or politically or in businesses and so, they continued to be involved. And they are still around. Some of them are still, there are still guys in the parliament that were members of the Communist Party back in the days, right?
The prime minister was.
Yeah.
He was in the Communist Secret Police and he was in the Communist Party.
So imagine the connections, this old boys network that is there, imagine those connections.
Oh yeah, it's everywhere. It's still heavily ingrown into the system. The communists and the ex-secret policemen who were like,
best
spying
buddies,
on you and giving information. Prime Minister was one of them, And it's troubling, but it will change. It just takes time. It just takes time,
Patient is our middle name.
Yes.
I wanted to kind of a little bit take a different direction. So you're gay.
Yes.
When did you know that you were gay?
Well, I guess it comes naturally. I don't recall the specific moment, but I guess it wasn't, I wouldn't say ever since, but I would say probably the time when you start evolving into puberty. That's the time when you start thinking and reacting to certain things, yeah.
So and how long did that last, or how long was it before you kind of came out?
Well, I guess I'm a bit of a specific kind of story because I never had an actual coming out moment. It was a natural course of things, and I never had family or anywhere, I never had any opposition to that. You know, I come from an artistic family, so obviously no problem there. And my friends and people around me in Prague were always within liberal circles, very liberal. You know, I lived a lot in the music industry. As a kid, I was a lot in the film industry. I was a child actor before, actually, and so I've always.
So you have done films and music, and then now you're here. I should have brought you on for that, you know.
Yeah, so I was always surrounded by people in an environment that didn't see this as much of a talking point, too much, really. And also, I'm not the type of person to talk about it too often, unless somebody's interested, somebody asks, sure. But you know, I'm not a big gay rights activist or someone who's like extremely vocal about the subject. But when it came to the discussion or came to the question, I would say, yeah, that's right, I am, and nobody would sense to be too surprised or aggressive towards that piece of information.
So no negative experiences in that sense.
No negative experience.
And this is when you're here in Prague, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
this is after you come here. And do you think it would have been any different in Australia, or would it have been more complicated, or?
I don't think so. Australia is a very liberal place, especially when it comes to this subject. You know, Sydney has these huge Mardi Gras parades, pride parades. It's always been a very liberal subject there. Of course, I mean, every country has their liberal and conservative parts. But for example, Sydney as a city, I don't think it would be any problem whatsoever. It's a very open mentality.
It's very liberal here in this sense. I mean, like and that's one of the interesting thing about the Czech Republic is that on one hand it's extremely conservative and embraces very much like, I don't know, family values, and you know, like you have to visit your parents twice a month, and you know, like and you spend together a whole Saturday in the kitchen drinking beer, even if you hate each other, you still do it, you know.
Yes.
And on the other hand, it's very liberal when it comes to, you know, gay or you know, whatever, smoking weed, drinking in public. I mean, there's no, like, it's very, I don't know, it's almost like indifferent.
Yeah, well, there's this phenomenon that I like to talk about when people ask me about Czech mentality. There's a phenomenon of not giving a shit or not caring, because. And a great example is, you know, when you on the streets of Prague, probably nobody's going to care about two men or two ladies kissing. They don't care. They'll just walk past. Probably they won't even look at you. They don't care. But this also applies to somebody having a heart attack on the street, on the ground. Probably a lot of people will pass not caring and not giving a shit about them.
And
right?
you just die.
Yeah, you die. Of course. I mean, I'm being a bit harsh because the society is evolving. You know, it's different today than it was 20 years ago, but there is a certain thing about Czech people not caring, not reflecting on what's around them too much, and that's how they are. So it has a plus and a minus. There's a light side and a dark side to everything. So it's a very liberal place. I can probably go drunk, piss on a police car, nothing's going to happen to me. But you know, when you need help, it may not be that easy.
I'm thinking about, like, if we talk about, you know, let's say gay matters in a wider perspective, and I wanted to have a chance to talk to you about it because I know that we can have a conversation where I can be the devil's advocate without being,
that's right,
an asshole, or not too much of an asshole, let's say. But I'm often curious about this, the identity, like if my primary identity is based on my preferences, whether I'm attracted to men or women, and then I don't know, sexual preferences in that sense, does it somehow, I don't know, does it limit people from being something else? You know, like, can it? Because I've never really thought about myself as a heterosexual man. You know, do you know what I mean? When I wake up in the morning, I don't think, okay, I'm heterosexual.
Yeah. Well, this is something, you know, this identity concept. I think if someone asks me, you know, what my opinions on this whole subject, I think I would say that the ideal world for me is where we probably wouldn't even have this conversation. The ideal world is where we don't have the word gay, we don't have the word lesbian.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just human,
Yeah.
right? Of course, I do understand this is a difficult thing to overcome for society, which has been, which had rules prescripted for hundreds and hundreds of years that were all heterosexual.
Based on that, yeah.
So it's difficult, and we must understand this is a difficult thing to go through for anyone, and to understand these new concepts and learn to live with them. Luckily, most of the globe, not the entire globe, but most of the earth is learning how to live with it, starting from probably more evolved countries, and other countries follow. So we'll see. Maybe in 200 years, the word gay will be crossed out of the dictionary, but not as in a negative, but as in a positive. You know, we don't have to label it that much, and people will learn that as well. You know, and myself, you know, because people wouldn't think I'm gay when they look at me, or when they listen to how I talk or whatever, because of course people are used to the idea of this flamboyant gay person, which I'm not, and they would be surprised sometimes, you know, and then they will realize, oh, actually I didn't know, and now I realize that changes nothing about who you are. I just found out a new piece of information. So sometimes this catalyzing change can work just easy like that, you know. They get to know someone, then they realize he's gay, and they realize that actually the way they were looking at him before should be the same as you'll look at him after. But it's about a personal experience quite often. There's a lot of people in the world that had troubles understanding or understanding the concept of homosexuality. But when they did have a personal experience of befriending somebody who's gay, for example, or getting to know someone gay better, that is usually the most effective way of changing somebody's mind on this subject, you know. When you experience yourself, that's when you realize, you know, a gay man's not going to come to your house and burn down your traditional family. Just let him live. They'll let you live as well.
But do you think, like, I don't know, do you have any personal experience that has been negative in this sense? I mean, has it, because I don't know, like we are talking very much, or globally we're talking diversity and with acceptance and tolerance and what do you call it? Inclusiveness. And I am always, because, you know, obviously I just have to take the compass is me, how I think. I cannot think how somebody else thinks. And for me, I don't really care what people like, whether they eat potatoes or not, or whether they like girls or guys, or whether, you know, it's not my business. It's my business when somebody is trying to force me to do something that I don't want to do. Then I have a problem. But do you think that, I mean, is this problem, if we look, let's take away like maybe the Muslim world and parts of Africa and maybe Russia, but if we take let's say the kind of Europe and the US, is there actually a real issue of excluding gay people from being parts of the society?
I think it's we're halfway down the road. We're getting there. You know, there's certain things that I think still need to change. For example, looking at Czech Republic, we're facing a challenge with marriage equality. Marriage equality hasn't been voted through. Czech Republic only has an institution called registered partnerships. Registered partnerships were voted through not too long ago, I think 2005. And this is supposed to substitute marriage, but it doesn't have the same rules and doesn't have the same advantages and same kind of, you know,
legal standing and
as marriage does. You know, there's certain differences. A gay couple cannot adopt together. They don't have this like joint property rules of what happens in marriage and how you're going to sort out your property if you get divorced, you know, and they, you know, if your
inheritance,
if your partner dies, you know, all this. Some things are not adjusted at all, no rules, or maybe excluded, and sometimes discriminating, and it's not just about the legal factor. What marriage equality can bring to a society is educating a society further on and changing the perception for all generations. And I think a great example, you know, Holland was one of the first countries to have legalized same-sex marriage, and you know, and the Nordic countries as well. They all see an evolution of where, after legalizing that, the society would eventually learn to understand and be more accepting. And also suicide rates go down in the LGBTQ community. So, you know, legalizing same-sex marriage seems like a piece of paper, or just, you know, seems like something something just of a legal form, but it has consequences. It has widespread positive consequences proven in many countries through research that they can bring. However, we're facing some old structures. We're facing a religious issue, of course. The religious parties will not accept this. The conservative parties probably not. But I think, in the next election period, because we have an election coming up, so in the next 4 years, we have a big chance of legalizing same-sex marriage, because it does seem that most of the political parties are not giving any direction on how to vote on this part. So each politician himself will decide
kept
how
by
to vote.
his own conscious. Yeah.
So this gives us a chance. And surprisingly, believe it or not, people like the Communist Party will most probably support same-sex marriage, because actually, I'm not a fan of the socialists. I hate communists to the bone. But surprising, one of the things is that they're quite positive towards this attitude, because they're socialists.
They decriminalized.
Yes, I did this research
sex,
on the history of gay sex or gay rights in Czech Republic and Czechoslovakia, and it was actually during the communist regime, I think in 1968, 58 or 68, that the communists decriminalized same-sex intercourse. And it was based on a scientific research, actually. The communists based something on a scientific research, and it was the same-sex intercourse. So that's surprising.
That's crazy, actually.
Yeah, but I don't want to idealize it. Of course, gay people were prosecuted and behaved aggressively towards during the communist regime. So the reality was quite different. But the point being, I think we're facing a challenge. But if we can make it, if we can vote this through, I think we could see change. Czech Republic is one of those countries where change takes more time than somewhere else. Decision making is slower than someone else. Sometimes I admire Nordic countries for their decision making and how policy making is swift and decisive. Here, subjects like this take time, and it's also because we're a very populist. The politics here are very populist, so they're very afraid to be vocal with certain ideas or certain,
Yeah, they don't want to be too radical.
Yes, they don't want to be too radical, especially before the election.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why the vote didn't happen before the elections, because nobody really wanted to, lose votes, because Czech mentality is conservative still. So a lot of people will see this as a problem, and a lot of people wouldn't vote for a party that would approve of same-sex marriage, for example. But I hope it's not. I hope it's not the main thing here. We had this issue a couple of days ago where the Christian party leader said that he cannot have a coalition with somebody who supports same-sex marriage, and suddenly same-sex marriage became this subject on where the whole democratic future of the country was hanging on. And we're like, come on, like, is there nothing more important in politics and in leading a country than what I'm doing in my bed? And you're going to sacrifice the democratic future of a country because of this? And these are the challenges we need to overcome. I think it comes through education, and I think it comes through personal experiences, getting to know people who are gay or getting to know people who are trans, getting to know them and finding out that there's nothing, there's nothing about it,
But do you think that, like, talking about this, because it's education and it's kind of seeing the things, a new, I don't know how do you say, new way of living in front of you, and getting to know people personally and so on. But then I'm thinking, okay, then it kind of takes me back to, let's say, Gay Pride is then the biggest event that the community has to kind of keep its voice, or voice its voice, let's say. And then if I think about it, I mean, I love Gay Pride. I love watching the parade, and it's super fun, and everybody is happy, and it's fun to watch. But if I would make myself 3 levels more conservative, and I would see Gay Pride, I would just think, why are they showing their ass? Or why does somebody needs to show their titties? Or why do these people need to be dressed in leather? Why does it have to be sexual? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a big part of the gay community that's not comfortable with how the Pride parades look like. However, I can be uncomfortable with that. And actually, to be honest, I am a bit uncomfortable. Sometimes it's a bit too graphic for me. But what is more important, even more important, that feeling that I have, what is more important is the feeling for the freedom of expression. You know, anyone can go and organize a parade in the city and do whatever they want, as long as okay, maybe they, you know, shouldn't be having sex in the streets, which luckily is not happening, and you shouldn't be shooting people. But otherwise, you know, you could do kind of whatever you want. We decided we want to make a freedom festival on Wenzel Square, and we make a concert. You know, anyone can do whatever they want. You know, but I mean, sure. I mean, for me, it is a bit too graphic, but you know, it's their right.
I'm just thinking if it actually maybe even turns some people that are kind of on the fence, if it might turn them the wrong. You know what I mean? It might rub them the wrong way. You know.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, as I talked before, you know, some people may have been turned on to the side by, for example, meeting me and discovering me that I'm a quite, you know, normal guy, not too flamboyant. And some people can be turned off the side by seeing this. That's very true, I guess. And I think that's like a joint responsibility of us as a subculture to work on that. And it requires discussion. It requires talking about this stuff. But as I said, the sense of personal freedom and freedom of expression is much stronger. And I guess that's why nobody in the community is ever going to protest too loudly about this. But we all have our opinions, you know, and I don't think there's any way we can affect this anyway. It's an evolution, you know.
It just takes time, and
my opinion is that it is a bit too exhibitionistic, I guess. I went to the Pride a couple of times. I enjoyed it. It was fun. And we all had our little world, and, you know, okay, the naked butt guys were up front. I was with my friends at the back, you know. Live and let live, you know.
I'm thinking, because as you said, I mean, obviously it's everybody has the right to set up an event and to promote whatever they stand for and what lifestyle they. Just made me think if a lot of people would come to my middle-aged heterosexual white male parade, you know,
you can try it.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to a thing that I'm thinking, like we are like if I take let's say if we take me as an example, a middle-aged white heterosexual man, not maybe the most popular species on Earth at the moment.
Not in 2021.
But we have feelings too. No,
should be happy you're not ginger. You know?
Could be worse.
Okay.
But no, but I'm thinking like so. What we are being told through Me Too, for example, and there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity. There is a lot of talk about like sexual harassment, and I feel that a lot of let's say the basic animal instincts that a white middle-aged man can have, which are, you know, to be attracted to a woman, or heterosexual white middle-aged man attracted to a woman, and you know, wants to talk to her and wants to find out if, you know, are we gonna make something happen, and I feel like this is the let's say the line there that keeps you in the good books has become more and more and more narrow, and almost to a point where we are kind of denying that, you know, a man can be attracted to a woman and he can be attracted to her sexually, but he might also see her as a human. You know, he doesn't necessarily see her only as a sexual being. You know, he actually can also see her as a human at the same time. And then on the other end, we have, as you said it earlier, subcultures. I don't know even like that word, but you know, we have these groups of people who are out there, and it's very sexualized somehow. It's very much driven by sexual things. It's not like, because for me it doesn't even have to be like that. If you want to love men, just love men. I don't really care about, like she said, what you do and then in the bathroom or wherever. You know, it's none of my business. And I'm just, it's such a polar opposite. I feel like, and I'm not crying here on behalf of white middle-aged heterosexual men. I'm not. But I feel that there is a certain group of people where we're saying, ignore your instincts, ignore your urges. But then there is another group that is actually very much supported by the same people that tone me down. They tone up people who are very sexually defined.
I think it's this challenge of this hypercorrect world. Hypercorrectness is an issue we're facing. I come from as we see, a subculture that's very, we have to be liberal because we're gay, but that doesn't necessarily mean, for me personally, I don't necessarily fully support the hypercorrectness of today's world. Of course, I would support the principles of the Me Too movement, but how far do we go? There's certain things that are natural to the human species, but we're not pigs and dogs. We're intelligent. We're human beings. We're Homo sapiens sapiens, and so we learn to navigate intelligently with what to do with our urges, and how to behave. So of course we need to trust ourselves that we're not going to strip a woman on the street and rape her in between the tramway. But we're intelligent. We speak. We find out what she's like. If she seems to like me or not. Unfortunately, there are some people who don't understand these social boundaries, but of course, we have to learn to live that as well, and we have to talk about what's wrong and what's right. But do we have to go so far as into making a man uncomfortable for just looking at a lady at some certain way? I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to navigate this. There is a history of oppression, sexist oppression, for example, and there's a history of injustice in work terms and unequal opportunities, and dates back to unequal opportunities. Women couldn't vote in many countries in history. So this is based on something true and real, and we do have to talk about this. But I think we should be more natural about the things we do. Political correctness and hyper-correctness is maybe going too far.
But do you think? I mean, do you see that here in the Czech Republic, or is this more like on the global?
Czech people are more liberal and less politically correct. And that's what I like about this country. I'm not a politically correct person either. And sometimes it's nice to feel this kind of laid back kind of environment where you don't have to stress too much about what you're saying. And of course, I live in an artistic bubble, of course, and what I do, I work in culture, so that's also a different type of people. I don't work in a corporation.
Yeah, I mean, it would be different if you were in a factory or a coal mine.
Yes, exactly. But, it's nice to be in an environment where things are not taken so seriously. For some people, it can be challenging. But then we must trust ourselves as intelligent species to navigate through this. We don't need rules that say yes or no, 1 or 0, You don't. It's not that simple to say you can't touch women. What does that mean? It's like, okay, maybe next time we can't shake hands because it's inappropriate. We don't do rules like this. We sense, we are intelligent people. We sense what we can do in a situation or not. Of course, there's people who are born with super low intelligence and they have to have special,
but they have always been there, we somehow as a society, we managed to deal with that. Yeah,
there's ways of dealing with that, exactly. But I do understand that all these movements, the hypercorrectness, is a reaction to the state of things that have been. So any action needs a reaction. I guess that's natural. But let's stay human, Let's not limit out, because we're going to limit ourselves to an extent where, as you said, that line, keeping you in the good books, is so narrow and becoming more and more narrow. We'll have nowhere else to step soon. And do we stop walking? Probably not.
But this hyper correctness, I mean, and political correctness, it reaches out to a lot of things. I mean, you see businesses, global businesses, taking those matters, let's say, gay rights, or I don't know, some social responsibility matters, and they really present themselves as angels. And those same companies then hire 5-year-olds in China and work them to death in a factory. But we don't see that because it's in China, and then we complain about China polluting the world, but we actually put all the production there. But is this real? I mean, do you think that a 60-year-old white heterosexual CEO of an American company is honest in this, or is this just a show-off?
I think it's more of a show-off. I think it's a certain requirement put on companies by the society and by evolution.
But it's so fake then, because if you say we put this on the company, and they respond with something that isn't genuine somehow.
Yeah, it isn't genuine, but it's like with anything in corporations. They need to do things in order to keep a face. It's a PR stunt, basically. But everything has two sides, The society puts these requirements on companies to do all this, diversity management. However, someone needs to catalyze change. Someone needs to lead for others to follow. So learning to be a more tolerant society never just came by itself. Somebody had to bring up this subject, and somebody had to be very assertive and aggressive about this subject. And it's the same with racial segregation. Somebody had to be vocal, somebody had to start talking more and be aggressive to the point to stop this. So having this diversity management, as we can call it, in corporations and big companies may be a show-off. It may be something that's been put on as a requirement and something that's a PR thing, but it brings fruit. It does bring some results that are positive, I think. Because at the end of the day, who's it going to hurt? You know, if we try and make a more inclusive environment, we try to, you know, give a reaching hand towards people who were just different than others and maybe have been mistreated because of that. It's always nice to have a safe workspace. However, circling back to the ideal world I talked about, the ideal world where we're not having this conversation, this should stop at some point. Now,
that it has an end game or end point.
It's long far away, of course, and in some countries it hasn't even started. As you said, we left out some of the Muslim countries and African countries where there's still gay intercourse is punishable by stoning to death. This is a long and difficult change that has to come from below. But I don't know, in 500 years, when we finally come to a point where it's so normal to be different, we will not need this diversity management.
We won't even have the word different anymore.
We probably won't need the Prague Pride. We won't need a heterosexual white male day organized by you. We won't need any of these because we would ideally be used to the fact that people are different. I know there's skeptics, when there's this discussion about marriage equality in the Czech parliament, some of the conservative politicians said, "Oh, so what's next? You're going to have sex with children next?" You're like, oh, come on. Once again, we are an intelligent species. We learn to adapt and overcome, and we learn our context, and we're not idiots, Just the society, maybe the trends tend to make us idiots. We're simplifying stuff, and we could lengthily discuss if society is becoming more stupid or not by the day. But we're still intelligent. I still, maybe I'm naive, but I trust us as people to navigate through all this intelligently.
I think talking about, I think that it's, and that's actually an interesting angle, is that I think it's very difficult to be against diversity somehow. It's, okay, that's came out wrong, actually, because as you're saying, we need those kind of pioneers, we need those front runners, we need someone pushing the boundaries, we need that in everything, we need it in both directions. We need, someone conservative, and then we need someone very progressive, and then we need to find some line in the middle where, most people are kind of happy with what path is chosen. And, you can see this, one of the biggest things for feminist movement in Iceland was a very radical all-female, only female party in 78, 85 or something. They had just 3 women or something sitting in the parliament, but those 3 women said the same fucking stuff all over again until the other parties, the big ones, said, guys, we got to put this female stuff on the agenda, because if we don't, these girls are going to get more votes. So their influence was far greater than their voting reflected. So, but on the other hand, like what I feel now in this hyper-correctness is that if someone is there saying, okay, I don't know, I don't know even what to say. Just let's say that in every company there has to be at least 10 gay people working. If anybody would say, listen, are we sure that those 10 people are the most qualified employees?
The quotas.
Then he is gay-phobic or homophobic.
Well, that's troubling, because I don't agree with the quotas. And there's a problem in the film industry, for example. There's some directors who, as part of the contract for directing a film, is that at least 50% or 60% or 70% of the crew have to be black or some ethnicity or whatever. And I think I can't necessarily agree with that, because I don't care. If I was a director, I think I don't give a shit if my crew is purple or yellow or black or white. I want my crew to be the most qualified, and I want my crew to be the best crew in the world. And so it's difficult for me to agree with the quotas, but I can agree with the quotas as a ad interim kind of thing. For the meantime, for now, use the quotas to get people used to a different approach to things, because of course in some ways racial segregation is something that should have never existed, but it's still so deeply enrooted in some people's minds that it needs to be pushed out. So we can start off maybe with some quotas, we can start off with an all-female party, but it's something that has an end game, as you said. I think we need a first aggressive push, and then we need to kind of normalize and stabilize in a way. It's all about first big steps, and then kind of making it smooth again, if that's understandable.
Yeah, I think yeah, for sure. And I think also, you can look at these quotas in a way that we need to encourage those people that feel marginalized to come and be part of it. Because okay, maybe we'll find out that not 10 gay people want to be actually working in this company, but if we don't tell them that they're welcome and that we make sure that there is space for them if they're qualified and blah, 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 then they might never, embark on the journey of trying. So it's a push and pull thing. But on the other hand, what I have a problem with is that whenever somebody asks, if I just say, well, why should someone be chosen over me based on sexual preference or orientation? I don't like calling this a sexual preference, because it's not about sex. It's based on attraction to whom he or she is attracted to.
Well,
I don't want to be called automatically then that I'm homophobic and this is where I feel that it's super like
it's difficult to navigate that.
Yeah, and you can't ask a question without being accused of being against someone.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to be in a position where you're afraid to ask those questions or be critical about that, because it doesn't make sense. We should always, we can't, I don't know how to call this, it's just, I think it's okay not to agree with that, because quotas and things should be designed to catalyze change, but it shouldn't become something normal. We should not need quotas to invite diversity and inclusiveness. It should be something natural within us, But of course, for this to be natural, it needs to start somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like, I talked about racial segregation. Rosa Parks, she needed to stand up for herself, and in that bus, well, actually not stand up.
She sat down
she
for herself.
Sat down, and she needed to say no.
Yeah.
She just said no.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm reading a book by Susan Cain called Quiet. It's about the power of introverts in a world
I read
that
book.
Stop
It's a great book.
She starts talking about Rosa Parks. She was a very timid,
small woman,
silent, small woman.
Yeah.
But it was her who stood up and said no and started a movement. And the movement tended to be aggressive at some times. Black Panthers, extremely aggressive. Black Panthers, some call them even a terrorist group. But it was part of a history of an involvement where people had to stand up aggressively for themselves. And I guess, quotas or something is a way of aggressively standing up for something, like an iron fist of dealing with things. But that has an end game, It always has to pass. Once you made your point and you change something, you should, continue.
Try to let it be natural.
Let it be natural. It needs to. That's inclusiveness. Invite including into the society, making the society aware of this, and so aware of it that it's not aware of it anymore. It's just part of the society. But this is, of course, utopia to a certain extent.
Yeah, but that's what we're all striving towards, an utopia. Everything is an utopia in the end. We're trying to create a society without death, without accidents, without rapes, without we're always trying to eliminate everything that has a negative effect on us. It's just in our nature. But I was reading. It's just curious. I was reading about a restaurant the other day on Google, and I saw on the listing that it said that it's LGBTQ friendly, and it kind of made me think: are there some places that are unfriendly to the community?
Probably they are.
Uh-huh.
I don't go there.
But would you? I mean, is this? I mean, and it made me think: do we actually need to say this? Are we there where we actually? Yeah. I mean, like, is there anyone standing at the door at some place saying, "Are you gay?" Yeah, okay, go out. Or is it because they don't want people to kiss there? Or
yeah, exactly. I mean, we should evolve to a point where we don't need that label, right? And I think we're evolving towards that. This particular case of, restaurants or establishments being friendly or not friendly to gay, I think we're almost past that, or at least when we talk about the evolved.
And you don't feel this here. I mean,
no.
Are there any places where you would go to where you wouldn't want to go with your boyfriend?
No, not really. No. But also you adjust your behavior.
And you belong to a group of people that we like this place, so we go there. And I mean,
I think this is maybe something that is. Something that a heterosexual person probably wouldn't know or wouldn't realize, that as in a gay couple, sometimes you have to adjust your behavior sometimes, and sometimes sometimes you're in an environment and you sense that maybe it's not the best idea to kiss here, or hold hands, and we'll just kiss later. Sometimes you just feel that. Sometimes it's not that. I haven't gone through any harsh experience here, but sometimes you're like if you meet the skinheads coming from the football match, you're probably not gonna go French kissing in front of them, right? So you adapt, and then you're always on the lookout. You always have this sense of looking out what's around you just in case. That's a burden that comes with that, but then I don't want it to be a sob story. I don't think it's something that I should I'm not looking for pity. Right, this is the natural part of things, and it will change, and it is changing. And nothing changes from day one to day two. Change is gradual, and many subjects that are dear and important to today's young generation have this kind of radical sense of trying to change something overnight.
Yeah.
It's not possible. We can't just go out and say, okay, from tomorrow we're going to have renewable energy everywhere. It doesn't work that way. If I do that and it's raining tomorrow and there's no sun, I can't. I don't know. I can't cook my food or something. I don't know. Yeah. So we go gradually. We think about all different types of energy. You're going half, and eventually, maybe in 50 years, we'll have 90% renewable energy. Maybe. And it's the same with catalyzing changes in terms of diversity. It's like eventually society needs to learn, or doesn't need to, but we want the society to learn how to, live in this diverse world. But someone who's lived in a little village for his entire life will not learn to understand what gayness is in a matter of a day. He needs to experience and learn about that, and we can't place that burden on people around us to automatically be super tolerant, automatically be super inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a very kind of homogenic society, in the middle of fucking nowhere where nobody even wanted to come, and I remember like when I was like 12, I was working in this tire garage, where we changed tires of summer to winter and repaired tires of cars, and I had this part-time job there, and there was a black guy working there he was from Jamaica or Barbados, and
in Iceland.
Yeah, and he was a part-time dance teacher, and then he worked and it was really interesting because I could see the difference. I was 12. He immediately became my best friend because the older guys gave us all the shittiest cars. We had to change the tires on the Lada and the Skoda because those cars had still the tubes in them, so it was a nightmare to fix. But there was a obvious racism going on there, like without any abuse. It wasn't abusive, but it was just clear who was at the bottom of the food chain there. But to me it wasn't, because like I just saw this guy. I mean, I had never met a black person in my life before that. I mean, maybe in Spain or something when we were traveling, but I had never really been. And obviously, I mean, because I was so young, and like next time I met a black person, it was just okay. It was another, and then you, as you're saying, you can't take someone from a village and just expose them to something and expect them to see it for, I don't know, the most normal thing in the world on day two. It just takes a little time, and it took time for this guy in the garage to kind of work himself into the group, and everybody was a little bit skeptic, and eventually over time it was fine, but I could feel it in the beginning that, okay, he's different, we need to treat it differently. And it was the same when we got a lot of people from Yugoslavia to Iceland in 90s, 90 to 1995 and some stuff until the 2000s. It was the same there. They was met with a lot of skepticism in the beginning, but then eventually it just, I don't know. Maybe I need to create this white, middle-aged, heterosexual men group. That
No, maybe no, but it's right, and the same principle applies in the intergenerational dialogue. We can't accept we can't expect an older generation to automatically understand the principles of the newer generation. It needs to be a dialogue.
And they never did. I mean, I remember when the Beatles came. I don't remember because I'm that old.
Wow, you're old.
But I remember reading about that. My mom's parents just didn't understand this. I mean, why are these guys growing their hair? Why are the girls screaming? And it was abnormal. It was weird. And it was the tool of the devil. It was like, I mean, when fucking Ozzy Osbourne came out and accidentally ate the head of a pigeon, then they thought it was the Antichrist. We've had all these, where the older generation just points at the younger ones and what the fuck is wrong with those people,
And it goes on like that and on and on and on. And it's going to go on forever like that. Yeah. And that's part of life. I mean, we have to keep our hearts open and try to be understanding to everything around us,
Yeah. If you picked one thing that you would want to see here in the Czech Republic that would change for the community, would that be the same-sex marriage?
That's a tricky question.
Yeah,
that's a tricky question. I think it wouldn't be same-sex marriage, because I think if I could pick one thing, it would be something more above these
above
issues.
Legal issues. Yeah,
I would pick something inside the heads, the minds, and the hearts of people here. I think Czech Republic and the people in Czech Republic are fantastic. Wonderful people, very open, very warm. But sometimes we as Czech people need to learn more about the concept of this responsibility of all of us together, and not pointing at everyone else, and taking responsibility for our actions, taking accountability, and learning how to respect people around us, but also learning how to okay, I'm drifting away into a very la la land right now. Maybe it's not specific enough, but I think I would like to pick a certain shift of mentality, which I cannot define. But I think there's a certain X factor that we're missing that would help change so many other things, if that makes sense. So I think, for example, marriage equality and approving marriage equality should be a result of how mentality and minds have changed.
Yeah, not the forced.
Yeah. So if I could pick something, I would like to just make tiny little tweaks to the mentality, but not much. There's not much I would change, because I don't want it to sound like I don't like Czech people. I'm one of them, and I think we're a lovely nation, and we're a lovely, fun bunch of people in this very funny country in the middle of Europe, and there really isn't much that I would change. Just little things, and a general kind of overview, a general kind of I don't know. Just cut that.
Openness somehow.
Yeah, more openness, maybe. I don't know, but maybe I'm not Maybe this is a entire human race thing. Maybe this isn't about.
Yeah, but this is what affects you. This is where you live, So you. That's where you would usually start. You start in your own garden before you go to somebody else's garden.
Yeah. I guess the entire human race has that issue. We need to know. We should know better about what's right and wrong. We should know better about how we affect the world around us. We should know better about the context we live in.
I think for me it's such a, and I'm a little bit afraid that we're losing some of the tolerance because of this hyper-correctness, political correctness, that in a sense that we're actually radicalizing people by trying to silence their opinions, and I think it's dangerous, because I don't think often. I often think that that people that we perceive as being against something are maybe not really against something. They're actually just pissed off because they feel marginalized, that
that's,
that's true.
That's
their
happening.
opinions don't matter anymore, or I'm out of date, I'm too old, or I'm too white, or I'm too this or that, or whatever.
Yeah, it's always, as I said, it's a dialogue, and a dialogue is a dialogue because it has two sides.
Yeah.
And each side needs to listen to each other. And as I was talking about, Susan Cain in her book about introversion and extroversion, it's so often about us as people being loud and talking all the time, but not listening enough. And I think this concept that she talks about or writes about is, to me, one of the most important things that we should talk about in human race in 21st century. Are we a world that just keeps talking too loud and not listening, or can we learn to listen to people around us much more? Can we learn to pinpoint the point where I stand and what stands around me, and be aware of what's around me? I think that's an issue we're facing. We're loud, and look around us. Donald J. Trump, what the fuck, man? He doesn't know anything, but he's loud. Does that make him? What does that make him? Nothing, right? So we should listen to people,
Yeah, but I think we are. I mean, we have always gravitated towards the one that is loud. If the person, whoever that is, whether it's a man or a woman, or a non-binary person, then, well, we haven't had that yet. We don't have any transsexual leaders.
Not that I know of.
But we've always gravitated towards those who have a charm or an ability to convince. And it's a really, really charisma, for better or worse of how it's being used, can get often the wrong people into some places, And I think that is, we've always, because we are a herd animal, we want to belong to a group of people. We want to, and we want someone to lead that group somehow. And we often, but obviously the quality of listening and to analyze and make up your own mind can get lost in all this noise.
Yeah. And it's natural to look for leadership. And the mentioned Rosa Parks, she wouldn't be able to lead the mass, but she met Martin Luther King Jr. And together he had the voice and she had the content. She had something to say, but she needed an amplifier, because that's what the world is like. Of course, as you said, we always lean to the loud and to the visible. But maybe this is what I wanted to say. If I could change something about people, maybe here or maybe the world, I would like them to listen more. I would like them to take in their surroundings more. And I think that itself has the possibility to change everything, or a lot of things at least.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're just selfish idiots,
Yeah. I wish that the Russian cleaning woman who came here earlier would learn to listen, because what she just does to me is that she just speaks louder and louder until she believes that I understand Russian, which I don't. But okay, Oliver, it's been great to have you. Well, if people want to know more about Freedom Festival and these kind of things, I will put links. I can put links of all this into the episode description. Is there something that you're working on that you really want people to know about other than that? Is there some homepage, or is there Oliver.com, changingtheworld.com, Oliver?
Well, there's olivermcgillick.net if you want to see my CV. I don't know if that's very interesting, but
I'll put that in also. That could be great.
I guess nothing specific, but I just hope people enjoyed.
But people can Google your old album.
They can Google my old album. That's true. They can listen to a very depressing record with, I think it's 8 songs I made.
I'm gonna link that to the episode description as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, nothing in specific. I just hope this was a pleasant little conversation.
Yeah, it was at least for me.
It was for me, definitely, and I hope for the listeners.
Yeah, most important. Fuck the listener. No, I will edit this. No, don't, guys. Unfuck the listeners here. If you're still listening and you're not angry at me for saying this horrible, what a stupid podcaster I can be. Anyway, The show has a Facebook page, The Bunker, How the Hell Did We End Up Here, and Instagram page, The Bunker Prague, and then a YouTube page, The Bunker, How the Hell Did We End Up Here, just still pictures of me while you listen to the audio. Great when you're at work and you pretend you're doing something, just put YouTube on the background and you can listen in your headphones and everybody thinks you're doing something constructive and you're just listening to my bullshit. That is good. Oliver, are we good?
We're good. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thanks for your time and have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye.